Hello, everyone. Thank you for checking out this special episode of Really Dicey. This is Manny, and I'm here with.
Chris O'Neill from Ninth Level Games.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. I enjoyed our last conversation about the Mazes role playing game, and today we're going to talk about the Return to Dark Tower.
Which
So,
is 100% compatible with Mazes, the role-playing game.
yes, which is fantastic. Dark Tower is a very interesting game. It came out in the 80s, was remade to Return to Dark Tower, and now we have the role playing game. If I may ask, how did it happen?
I think it might be the first role-playing game based on a board game that was itself based on a board game. So the original game, near and dear to my heart, came out in 1981. The Return to Dark Tower, which is, a spiritual successor, I'll call it, was put out by Restoration Games a few years ago. Like almost everything that Restoration does, it's taking a pre-existing idea and then really bringing it into the modern turn. And one of the designers at Restoration is a very good friend, Brian Neff, and got to play a very early version of Return to Dark Tower and immediately was struck at how the core of the game mirrored the structure in Mazes. We made a concerted effort. We put together a pitch. We went to Restoration and convinced Justin that he wanted to let us play with his baby. He was always interested in having a role playing game, and they don't make role playing games. It's not what they do. So he was very excited on that choice. And then over the next year or so, we kept piling on with more and more. Why the mirroring with Mazes made sense.
You mentioned that the mechanics are similar. Did you have any difficulties trying to convert a board game and the lore behind it into a role playing game?
Well, it's funny. And when we first created the game, I think that there was an expectation that we were going to spend a lot of time kind of developing lore. But Return to Dark Tower, even more so than its predecessor, is a very specific structure of a game. It's a game about acquiring the resources needed to fight a big bad, right? And so it immediately struck myself that if Mazes was sword and sorcery, if it was Conan the Barbarian, then Return to Dark Tower was Fellowship of the Ring, right? It's not Howard or Lovecraft. It's Tolkien, right? We're awesome heroes and we're going around to put to rights, we have to stop these evils and we have to get everyone together and we have to convince everyone to come with us because the only way we can win is together. And so that's really where we spent our time. We were given a lot of information about the game, and most importantly, we were given a lot of art from the game, which really the art is telling the story of the world. Because I personally, as a game player, I don't want to get bogged down deep in the lore. I want to tell a certain kind of story. And so what we did is we used Return to Dark Tower as a framework to create rules and to do things that would let us tell that certain type of story without bogging you down with without a lot of lore. So the game itself is definitely, most of what's in the book is crunch, which is really kind of funny because our books our work isn't all that crunchy, right? Like it's very narrative, it's very loose, it's very designed for improvisational play. But when you're telling a big story like this, you need a lot of scaffolding in order to hold up this big piece. And there was a lot of the other thing that we, luckily that we had is the game itself has every bad guy, every class, every monster that's in the board game is got at least its own page in the role playing game. The classes take up 2 pages. So.
Are there anything for anyone that's has the Mazes fantasy role playing game already? Does this book have any? You know how sometimes modules may have like, oh, you have a new player options, or new bestiary. Does this module offer anything like that?
Yeah. So I mean, if you're already playing Mazes, everything in this book can just be immediately put in. So it just all of a sudden you have 13 new classes. You have a whole and the whole bestiary of these things. You also have a couple of subsystems that if you want to use them to do some different things, you could. The opposite's true though. For a lot of people, Return to Dark Tower is a completely standalone game, right? Like, so I don't want anyone to think they need mazes in order to play it. But if you pick up a copy of Return to Dark Tower and you played it, and then you were like, I would like to do more, you can just turn around and get a copy of mazes, and all of a sudden you have all these new monsters and all these new classes and all this new information, and a lot more instead of time spent around telling and crafting a specific kind of story, which is this, we're off to kill the wizard. It gives you more of all the toolkit that mazes is.
When it comes to anyone new to role playing, would you say they still have to pick up mazes to learn to use Return of the Dark Tower, or do you feel that the access level is the same?
I think if you're coming in and you have played any kind of role playing game, Return to the Dark Tower is going to give you everything you need to play. If you've never played a role playing game before, you just played the board game before, I think there's enough. If you've never played the board game and you've never role played before, you're probably asking a lot. I mean, the nice thing is it is designed as a player. You don't really need a whole lot. So if you've only just played the board game before and you want to play Return to Dark Tower with your friends, the role playing game, it's a great jumping in place because it has everything you need. It's very straightforward. It's still a polymorph game, so it's just you have one die. You're always going to roll that die. All the information's on their character sheet. I think if you're going to run Return to Dark Tower, you need a little bit more. You need some plays in your belt. I know some people that are very good at running mazes games that find Return to Dark Tower a little daunting, not because the rules are crazy, but because just the scope. Like by the end of it, you're talking about like armies fighting against armies, and it's a little hard to get yourself out of when you've just been running games that have been about a guy in a cloak going into a dungeon. It's a big difference than me and this army of griffins are going to attack the Iron Top Hills and take this away from the Bane of Omens.
Usually, when most adventures and role playing games, usually 3 to 4 people. They go into a place to explore and have some sort of different adventures. This game, this Return to the Dark Tower, is it set up in that type of mindset? Is it more closer to the board game where you have to do resources? Like I'm just trying to imagine what it'd be
Yeah,
like to
it's more
play it.
like the board game. There is some resource management. But so the structure of the Return to Dark Tower, some of the things that are different about playing Return to Dark Tower than another role playing game. So it has a structured session 0 where you're supposed to sit down and as a group create your characters together. And the characters that you're creating, you're also defining who the bad guy is. And not just who they are, but why are you fighting them? And because unlike your traditional fantasy campaign of, hey, we're just a bunch of guys looking for money, right? Like there's more to it than that, right? Like it's not just why am I going to fight the Bane of Omens? It's the Bane of Omens killed my family, or the Empress of Shades what was my teacher, and now I found out that she's evil, and you have to you're going through that. So there's some structure to that around the session 0 and getting yourself ready. But then the game itself actually gives you activities that are similar to what you're doing in the board game: traveling, diplomacy, recruiting. You're doing these different kind of activities that all happens outside of the traditional dungeon crawls. And the dungeon crawls are quote unquote quests in the Return to Dark Tower role playing game, are then treated as their own piece. So after you've done, hey, where's everybody going and what's everyone doing? Then we're going to go save this village or go investigate that temple or go down into that dungeon. And to support that, everyone has 2 characters. So you have a hero, but you also have a companion. So you have a major hero that's your forefront, and then your secondary hero that can go and do stuff with other people while your main hero is active and involved. So I can send my main character to go do some diplomacy while my minor character is with you, Manny, on a quest to go, get this jewel out of this dungeon.
What can you tell us about the art design for this book? Is it similar or different from Mazes?
It's a lot different because we started mazes in almost everything that I've worked on before in the past. have had a very limited art budget. Stylistically, we've really focused on kind of a old school kind of line drawing aesthetic. But when we came into this, because we were partnering with Restoration, who had already made all this art for the board game, we just got all the art. The book isn't a black and white interior; it's full color, drenched throughout. It's these gorgeous paintings of all of these characters and these monsters. Every monster has a picture. Every bad guy has a picture. Every character has a picture. And then there's more, and it's just like insane. I was like a kid in a candy store from a design perspective. I knew ahead of time what I wanted it to look like. And one of the things I really enjoy is when people pick up the book, they're like, it looks really big, but then the typeface is large, and it's designed because it really wants you to let the art breathe. Right? There's plenty of space where you can just really just like let the art. We were willing to spend extra pages in the book so that we could have everything without it being jammed on top of each other. But we really spent a lot of time, and because of the nature and the way that the board game is kind of set up, there's this really neat four color kind of pattern that approaches, and so we use that throughout the book as well. So the book's real cohesive looking.
Was this a good experience overall? Was this a? I mean, you've done something as a designer that very few have done.
Yeah, I thought it was great. I would love to do it again. In fact, we might have some news in the near future about something similar that we might be working on. So working with Restoration was a breeze. They're really great people. So working with a great partner always makes things easier. Working with a board game, you got to work directly with the designers. We didn't have any fights. We didn't have any like, oh, you're not allowed to do that. I mean, the one thing, like there was a couple of times where we would show them things and they'd come back and they'd be like, oh, we're not allowed to do that. Like for instance, we're not allowed to use some of the words from the original game because they're not owned by anybody. They're owned by the original artist. And so it was like, okay, well, all right, well, I'll take all those things out. But it was never a problem.
Do you see a possibility that if there's enough interest, that there might be more Return to the Dark Tower books?
Yeah, I mean, we have a really great opportunity if it really takes off and there's a desire. I can see us digging into some lore, and really like building out some things about the Four Kingdoms. So there's an entire world that could be painted there that we're just scratching the surface of. One thing that we are definitely doing is every few months we're going to be putting out adventure packages that you'll be able to get on Drive Through RPG that are a couple of different connected pieces for you to put into your Return to Dark Tower games and use them as um because of the idea. We have adventures that we make for mazes, and you can literally use those mazes in your Return to Dark Tower game right now. But all of the adventure modules that we've done kind of have like a big story to them. Each one's a standalone idea that's designed to play in 2 to 3 hours at your table, so you can sit down, create characters, and play the game. And so we're looking to do something a little different here, which is to kind of make pieces that a GM could throw into their game when that occurs because of the improvisational nature. Oh, here's a haunted castle and like a couple of different things you could do. So, oh well, they've done this. Well, let's make sure I use A and B. So I think there's some interesting things there. So I'll be excited to see what my team comes up with.
Oh wow, that's really excellent. I was about to ask you if the other ventures can be used. The other majors adventures can be used for this module.
Yeah,
Oh,
in
that's
fact,
fantastic.
they're using the adventures that we already have are a great way of like cutting out. Having a couple of different adventures gives the players options on what to choose, because a big part of the game is player driven. Where do the players want to go? What do the players want to do? How do they want to attack things?
So, if I may ask, when you play tested this, what character did you roll up, and how far did you go?
So as almost always, I am the lifelong ever GM. I did get to watch a lot of people play a lot of different guys. And what we did going through it, we did a lot of skipping around. So we did a lot of like, okay, well, Now we're going to test some later stuff. So let's fill in and pretend that we've done all of those pieces, so that we could go and try the game at all the different levels. My favorite character that came out of it, though, was it actually showed up in one of the streams we did, who was a thief named Yellow Lemons, which is just a great name for a little, he was a little guy with a big attitude, and he was a companion character, and he was just supposed to be like a minor guy, and he just really stole the screen every time came on Yellow Lemons, and everyone was like, "Well, what's going to happen to Yellow?" So really enjoyed Yellow Lemons.
So this is out now on Drive Through RPG. Is this also available in print form as well?
Yeah, so I mean, the print form is the primary. In fact, there's some really great print materials. It goes into retail the middle to end of January. So, but it has been delivered to Kickstarter backers. So anyone that backed it on Kickstarter, and some retail stores that backed it on Kickstarter already have it. So it is available at better friendly local game stores everywhere. But it'll be available in mass, pretty soon too. It is kind of weird about the end of the year. Like when things come out, it's difficult to release something around Christmas. You don't want it to get lost. So we actually pushed the mass release back a little while.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for talking to us about the Return to Dark Tower. Can't wait to check this out myself. And I can't wait to talk to you next month about the new Kobolds book.
Yeah, the new Kobolds book is great. We have all the stuff for it. There's some new stuff that I think will make people really laugh, and I think it's the best version of the game that we've had. That's saying something because we've been making it for 25 years. I'm really excited for people to get to play it.
Viewers, thank you for checking out this interview. Thank you for watching. Stay safe out there. We'll see you next time.